Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
And good evening, everybody, and welcome in to the latest edition of Tider Insider TV alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris, and for just the second time in the college football playoff era, Alabama is not among the Final Four. Still trying to adjust to that, right? It just doesn't feel right. Crimson Tide is set to face Kansas State in the All-State Sugar Bowl in New Orleans on Saturday, December 31st. That's New Year's Eve. Make note, 11 a.m. kickoff. That seems weird, too, for the Sugar Bowl. The Crimson Tide finished 5th in the college football playoff rankings. As I said, this is unusual for us, and this will be the first time that Alabama and Kansas State have ever played football, but it'll be the 17th time the Crimson Tide has played in the Sugar Bowl. Of course, I think it is the one bowl game most associated with Alabama football. Head coach Nick Saban is currently 15-6 in his career in postseason games. The game is set to kick off at 11 a.m., as I said, on ESPN. So, Rodney, a lot to wrap your arms around here. First of all, I don't like the early kickoff, but they got to get it out of the way for the bigger games. Let's talk about the matchup. And I've talked a lot about this on my radio show this week. I had you on Monday on Tide 100.9 FM. We discussed it. These are two entirely different programs. I mean, Alabama is the creme de la creme, okay? Kansas State's winning percentage all time is not very good. But once Bill Snyder got there, they got some respectability and relevance. It continues now that they're a really good program. And they are a team, despite 3 losses, that are good, hungry, motivated. I don't think they have to worry about any players opting out. They don't have near as many players that are considering the NFL or feel like they have an NFL future. I don't think they have as many players in the portal. So I say all that to ask you this. This Alabama team that we're going to see in the Sugar Bowl, do you think it will resemble even slightly the Alabama team that we saw wrap up the regular season in the Iron Bowl against Auburn?
Yeah, I really think that remains to be seen. I mean, what does Will Anderson decide? What does Bryce Young decide in terms of playing this game? You've got Jordan Battle. You've got Henry To'oTo'o. You've got a lot of guys that are seniors, a lot of guys that are leaving early, or a few guys that are leaving early, namely their number 9, as well as Will Anderson, expected to leave early. So, and you've got guys that jumped in the portal. You saw Trayshawn Holden right there. Yeah. So, I mean, it's going to definitely be a different team, but how much different? I mean, it only remains to be seen. But you talked about Kansas State. Watch them in that Big 12 championship game, Gary.
Tough.
They're a really hard-nosed football team. I mean, this is a team that, like you said, they may not have a lot of 5 stars, but they play extremely well together.
And they're excited and enthusiastic to be in the game. And for them, as I said, this is an opportunity. Let's put it in basketball terms. And I think Alabama's basketball program is a little higher than Kansas State's football program has been over the years. But this is like Alabama beating North Carolina, which they did, some time ago, or Kentucky or UCLA. For Kansas State, this is a chance to knock off the preeminent program in college football. And you better believe they're all in and fired up to do it. For Alabama, Rodney, no excuses. You're going to play with who you play with. But if you go to the game, I think it's important that whoever you take down there, that they dial in and they represent Alabama. Because if you don't have the right attitude for this game, on top of maybe not having your full arsenal of players, not only could you lose the game, you could potentially get embarrassed.
Oh, you really could. I mean, we've seen it happen before because, let's be honest, I think after 2008 when you lost to Florida, you went down, you played Utah and got smoked, really, although you came back, made it look somewhat respectable. And then the same thing happened with Oklahoma a few years ago in 2013. You lost to Auburn in the kick-6 game. You really maybe didn't seem like you wanted to be there, and you played not well. So how does it look in a week or two when maybe some of these announcements come out, Gary, and we have a better idea about what the roster is going to look like for Alabama? I think then we can really discuss that.
All right, the fact that Alabama's not in the college football playoff, and I said last week I thought Alabama would be number 5 in the final rankings, and they weren't. They were at 6 and really kind of closed the door because I thought the way it played out over the weekend, they still might get in. They did not. As you already alluded to, 2008, the SEC championship game, they lost to Florida. They didn't make it into the BCS title game. They went to New Orleans, and even Nick Saban said it. We just didn't get ourselves ready to play. For the guys that do play in this game, how much focus do you think they will have based on the fact that at Alabama it's pretty much become playoff or bust?
Well, I mean, you certainly would hope that they'll be focused. Again, we've seen it a couple of times where they haven't been. But, Gary, look, I think here's the thing. Let's just assume that maybe a couple of guys like Bryce Young and Will Anderson don't play. This is a great opportunity for other guys that I think are going to be potential strong contributors, starters next year, to make a big impact, to kind of get ahead of the spring practice, so to speak. Talking about a quarterback possibly, some guys defensively. So I think it could be a great opportunity if those two guys opt out. If not, then, hey, I think it's great that a guy like Will Anderson and Bryce Young would play in this final game.
And real quickly, we're watching video of Nick Saban. For Nick Saban, he's 71 years old. Everybody knows that. We know that the way this season has played out, there's a lot of negative recruiting going on. And this recruiting class will have been signed by the time they play the game. But still, how important is this game for Nick Saban in regards to people starting to question whether or not he's the same coach that he was a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I think they're all important right now. I really do. I felt like the way they finished the season against Ole Miss, and then obviously Austin Peay, and against Auburn, those were really big wins to me because of the things you're talking about. I think obviously there's a lot of negativity out there. A lot of opposing coaches are using these things in recruiting. So I think for recruiting purposes, for the future of the program, I think that kind of squelched that a little bit. So right now, I think this Kansas State game is a really big game. You want to win it. Finish with 11 wins. You've had a really good season. Maybe you didn't finish like you expected to, but it's still a good season.
All right, speaking of Coach Saban, it's time now for Coach Talk. Since the bowl announcement, there has been, of course, a ton of speculation, as we alluded to what and which Alabama players might sit out the game for opting out. Of course, others are entering the NCAA transfer portal. But Nick Saban never one to speculate, and he says very simply, we'll coach the ones that are available to play in the game.
We certainly have a great amount of appreciation and respect for the guys who, are going to finish the season with the team, and we're going to do the best job that we can to help those guys, put those guys in a position where they have a chance to be successful. There'll be some opportunity for some new guys, no question, but we're looking forward to the challenge.
All right, Rodney, the portal is what it is. It's portal season. There was National Signing Day in February. Now there's National Signing Day in December, and then there's the portal season, which comes before that. It officially opened on Monday. You see the numbers, nearly 1,000 FBS players already in the portal. 608 are scholarship athletes. Crimson Tide has 14 scholarship athletes that have put their name in the portal since the beginning of this past season. Among those, and more recently, JoJo Earl, Tommy Brockemeyer, Christian Leary, Javion Cohen, 2-year starter on the offensive line, Damian George, Amari Kite, 2 big tackles, Trayshawn Holden, the wide receiver, Tanner Bowles, Kyrie Jackson, Trey Sanders, Braylon Ingram, and some other guys that are walk-ons. So it's Rodney, it is what it is. I've been saying that on my radio show. The genie's not going back in the bottle. And I don't mean this negatively toward anybody because I'm dealing with the NIL too, and I understand a lot of people wanted to see the players get compensated. I felt like they already were. But once NIL came in and then this portal opened up, I got a lot of people call my radio show now saying, well, they need to do this and they need to do that, and they got to limit the amount of players that go in the portal. Not happening. If the entire 85-person roster wants to go in the portal, there's not a doggone thing you can do about it. And you can't limit the number of players that go in the portal. So now the portal is here. It is a viable option for these players, and many of them at teams all over the country are going to use it.
Well, listen, 14 in it now. And we expected it to be even more than this and expect more to jump in the portal at some point. So, this isn't really a surprise. This is a trend. This is the direction it's going. We talked about it for months and months and months. Even a couple of years ago when we saw this coming, we said, hey, this is what's going to happen. We also said, Gary, that when they did these things, that there were going to be other schools that were going to be tampering with players.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to be recruiting players on various teams. And I'm sure Alabama's having to deal with that now. Other schools recruiting your players.
Listen, you talk to people, I talk to people. I've got some friends that are coaches. I've got people that are working in these athletics departments, and the reality of it is they're not even going through other avenues now. These players and their families are being contacted directly, and their interest is being sought out by other schools. It's the reality of it. All this stuff about you can't contact players. Well, maybe you don't call them directly, although in some cases I think that's going on. But the parent, the coach, if you're a good player and there's any thought process that you might not be happy, people are getting in contact with you. And I think brokering deals is the only way I know to say it. I think there are offers on the table for current players at schools to go to other schools.
I mean, is anybody really surprised? I mean,
Shouldn't be.
You should have been able to see this coming. I mean, and again, I think it's something that, how are we going to deal with this?
I don't know. I don't know if we can right now.
Yeah.
That's like I've been saying, everybody says they need to do something. Well, who's they? Who's going to do it and what are they going to do? That question I've asked athletic directors, coaches, that question has yet to be answered. Who's going to do what? I don't know. Maybe the federal government. That's what Nick Saban said the night I was on his radio show, that maybe the federal government has to get involved. All right, still to come on Tider Insider Television, Alabama football picks up another commitment because recruiting is still going on. Also, soccer loses a heartbreaker in the College Cup Final Four. Here, head coach Wes Hart's message to the team after an incredible season. And coming up, we'll be getting to your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, the phone number 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882. There's the email address. You can also tweet at us using the hashtag TITV. We'll be right back with that show, the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide. This show, Tider Insider TV. Stay with us.
I do not want this to take away from what we've done this year. I mean, what an incredible season. Nobody except for these players as well as the other 27 players in our locker room and our coaches, nobody believed in us before this season started. I know this one stings, and I hope with time we'll be able to kind of forget about this game and appreciate everything that we've done this year.
This past Friday night, Alabama soccer fell to UCLA 3-0 in the College Cup semifinals in Cary, North Carolina. It was the first time the Tide had allowed 3 goals to be scored all season, and it was their first multi-goal loss of the season, but they lost to the best team in the country. UCLA last night came from behind to beat North Carolina 3-2 in double overtime to win the national championship. For Alabama to be there with Florida State, UCLA, and North Carolina, Rodney, the best in college soccer, and to be part of that College Cup, what a great year for the Crimson Tide. And welcome back to TITV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports. Alongside Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. Crimson Tide has picked up another commitment. 2024 linebacker Sterling Dixon from Mobile Christian. He's rated a 4-star prospect in that 2024 class. 172 tackles for the Leopards this season. 6'3", 210. He is a freakish athlete. Can play inside or outside. He's one of these guys, and I know it's high school football, but he is one of these guys that when you turn on the video, I mean, he just dominates. I mean, he is a terrific athlete and football player.
Yeah, I talked to head coach Ronnie Cottrell down there. Of course, he coached Deontay Lawson as well, who's going to be a fantastic player here. He's already, certainly made an impact. But he compares him a lot to Deontay as a player. He thinks he can play inside, outside, as you mentioned, Gary. Great athlete, obviously. Guy that's only going to be, just finished up his junior season, so got a lot of potential.
Yeah, he does. And Alabama, and I want a quick word on recruiting. The portal is here to stay, but coaches are out on the road this week. You still have to recruit out of high school too. I mean, that doesn't end. I guess the hard part is that when you sign these young men now, there's no guarantee that the next signing period they're even still going to be with your team, but you have to still work hard at recruiting.
You do. You really do. And Alabama obviously right now has the #1 class, Gary. They're still in on a lot of top targets, a lot of 5-star players still out there seriously considering Alabama. So right now, as you look at with the December signing period here coming up in 15 days, Alabama looks to be in really good position.
All right, Dixon is a good-looking prospect. Let's move on. Alex Mortensen has just been hired by new UAB head coach Trent Dilfer to be the offensive coordinator to Blazers. Mortensen has had a couple different stints at Alabama. People love him here. He's a terrific young coach. His dad, of course, Chris Mortensen from ESPN. Alex played quarterback at Arkansas, so a lot of SEC experience. He's brought a lot of value to Alabama, with the chance to be an offensive coordinator for UAB, a great opportunity for him. And I'll tell you this, I think to get to work with Trent Dilfer is something that he's probably looking forward to.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of Alabama fans may not know this. He's the son of Chris Mortensen, of course, of ESPN. And, Gary, I remember when he was recruited back in 2003, went to Arkansas. He's a guy that there's a lot of buzz about him in terms of his potential. Even though he hasn't been an on-the-field assistant, there's a lot of talk that this guy could be a rising star.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you'll see him back at Alabama in a few years. You never know. Well, coming up on TITV, an Alabama player wins another top defensive honor. Guess who that is? And up next, we'll be welcoming your phone calls, emails, and tweets. So there's the number again, 205-348-9882. Tider Insider Nation, go ahead and call in now. We want to hear from you next, right here on TITV. Alabama football's Will Anderson has won the Nagurski Trophy for the second consecutive year. It's presented to the top defensive player in college football. He's the second player to ever win the honor back-to-back. Pat Fitzgerald, former Northwestern linebacker who's now the Wildcats head coach, did it in 95 and 96. Anderson this year, 51 tackles. He had 10.5 sacks. Of course, last year, he had 37.5 tackles for loss and 17 sacks. But still a good year. He joins Jonathan Allen as the only Crimson Tiders to win the Nagurski Award. Jonathan won it in 2016. And welcome back into TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Let's jump out on the phone lines. Got a couple calls waiting, and we're going to start it off with Sammy up there in Walker County. Hey, Sammy.
Thanks, Gary. Rodney, you do a great job, guys. I can't figure Cohen out, 2-year starter transferring out, but my question is, Rodney and Gary, defensive tackles, specifically defensive tackles in the upcoming prospects. How's it looking on that? Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Sammy, listen, I tell you, those are hot commodities. I mean, it's really competitive when you're talking about recruiting defensive linemen. I mean, obviously, Alabama has 3 committed. I think Jordan Renaud is a great player out of the state of Texas. Obviously, Hunter Osborne's a really good player, and Edric Hill out of Kansas City. But, Gary, how do they finish? I mean, you've got Jordan Hall from Jacksonville, who's an outstanding player. I'd say Georgia right now with him. Alabama's still in the mix a little bit with David Hicks, who's a 5-star out of the state of Texas. He's committed to Texas A&M. James Smith out of Montgomery, of course. I think that's going to be a really competitive battle. So you kind of get the feel here that it's going to be really difficult to finish strong with a lot of defensive tackles. But don't forget there's the portal, too. Mm-hmm. You never know when a guy pop in that portal that you really like, and we'll see how they do.
Indeed, we will. Thank you, Sammy. Let's go over to Trussville and talk with Jeff. Hey, Jeff, welcome into the program.
Hey, Roll Tide.
Yes, sir.
When are we going to talk about the big yellow elephant in the room? 98 penalties for 848 yards this season.
Yeah, Jeff. I mean, certainly. I mean, it impacted the football team. There's no doubt about that. And it impacts any football team. And most really good championship teams, they don't have a ton of penalties. So a lot of things to look back on at why Alabama didn't win the SEC West and make it to Atlanta and in the college football playoff. But I think penalties is high on the list, Rodney. No doubt penalties cost them a couple of games, and they only lost 2 games, particularly the Tennessee game, and pulled a couple others out when they had a lot of penalties. But that was a problem. Yeah,
it was a real problem. It was something that I think we really thought that this team last year, after they kind of struggled with a lot of the new players, I think from losing the year before in terms of all the great players you lost after the national championship in 2020, Gary, and then this year you kind of thought maybe it would be more like 2020 with this group, and because of the experience they had from last year, and it just really didn't turn out that way. A lot of undisciplined penalties, a lot of mistakes. You talked about those penalties. I mean, yeah, they've got to get that cleaned up.
No doubt about it. Well, still to come on Tider Insider TV, Alabama men's basketball takes on a tough team, maybe the best team in the country this coming weekend, the #1 team in the land in the Houston Cougars. We'll have more on that and more of your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Again, the phone number 205-348-9882. Go ahead and give us a call. We want to hear from you, TITV Nation, right after this.
We gotta play everybody as if they're like the #1 team in the nation. That's how we gotta look at every game, even if it's a team that doesn't have as much hype as they do.
I don't have to worry about that because the next time they play, Rodney, is the #1 team in the nation. This Saturday at Houston, 2 p.m., Alabama beat the Cougs last year in a very emotional and hard-fought game that there were some tempers flared there at the end of that one. So Alabama, of course, went to Portland, won 2 out of 3 at the Phil Knight Invitational, beat North Carolina in 4 overtimes, beat Michigan State, lost to UConn, came home this past Saturday night and beat South Dakota State, a game where they had a 20-point lead. And the Jackrabbits led in the second half, but Alabama got the win 78-65. Noah Clowney's the SEC Freshman of the Week as he continues to play well. So Alabama basketball playing great, but a huge test coming up on Saturday. All right, let's get to our email of the day. And the email question of the day is brought to you, as always, by KDM Service Corporation, serving your family like our family. And it is twofold here. It's the same topic from 2 different people. What do you think of the strength coach? We don't see videos of players squatting 500 pounds lately. That's from Derek in Tuscaloosa. And it's followed up with a very similar question from James. Would a mix of the Cochran physicality and Rhea Ballou Canes give the team a better edge going forward? Of course, Dr. Matt Ray is now with the Saints, but David Ballou's still here. A lot of talk, Rodney, I guess, when when things don't go perfectly, people are looking for people to blame. And we've heard a lot of questions this year about the strength and conditioning program. You and I both felt when Coach Cochran left, it was probably time. And he wanted to get on the field. And I love David Ballou. I think his knowledge is unbelievable. A lot of people, though, are saying, well, maybe Cochran brought some energy that they don't have now. And maybe that's fair. I mean, there was always a lot of energy on that sideline when Cochran was here. You don't necessarily see that now. What's your take on those emails?
I know Scott Cochran's a legend around here, and he did a fantastic job. But the truth is, Gary, a lot of the NFL people that looked at Alabama's program the last couple of years that he was here, they felt like Alabama had fallen behind in terms of the latest strength and conditioning programs, the way they develop the players. And I think, David Ballou does a fantastic job. He has a great reputation coming here from Indiana. He's done a really good job here. And I get it. Everybody remembers the good old days with Scott Cochran. But I think David Ballou does a fantastic job. I don't think it really has a lot to do with what he's doing in terms of they lost 2 games this year.
All right, let's jump back out on the phone lines. And Reg is with us in Birmingham. Hey, Reg, we got a short period of time. How are you?
Okay, very good. When this trading players and all this paying players, Nick Saban advised all of us what was going to happen. And he just about has destroyed the game as we knew it. And we knew it when it started. But a lot of these wise guys wanted to catch Alabama by paying players.
Yeah.
Well, this is
All right, Reg, we got to get to the break, but I think you made great points. It's certainly changed the game, and it's going to be up to Nick Saban to adjust. We'll be back to wrap it up after this.